Did you check to see if they had a pulse? Did you check them at all?
My grandma's whole side of her face was blown off, so it's
Okay.
his. So like his brain was like on the coffee table.
But you didn't go over
Yeah.
and, just to double
I
check.
kissed both of them and then packed my left.
You and Nate attacked her?
There's both of us.
With what?
Like hammer thing. And then like a hammer thing with an axe at the other end. Do you know why you're in the interview room with us today?
Yes.
Okay. Why is that?
Murder.
Okay. So explain to me what happened. What do you mean by that?
My dad, he was on his medication.
Okay.
He needs to do stupid things.
It's hard to imagine what could go so wrong in someone's life to end up becoming a cold-blooded killer. But it's even harder to try to wrap your head around what could cause an actual child to do this. The people in these stories are teenagers, and the people they killed were their own family members. What causes a young person to think that taking the life of their loved ones is a solution? They single-handedly destroyed their own lives and that of their families because of what they did. Stay tuned to see how it happened. Eldon Samuel III took the life of not only his younger brother, 13-year-old Jonathan Samuel, but also his father, Eldon Samuel Jr., who was 46 years old. The murders took place on March 24, 2014 in Washington state. Eldon had a troubled and bizarre upbringing. Not only had his father abused him all of his life, but he also had some very strange beliefs. He believed that a zombie apocalypse was bound to happen, and that his children needed to be ready. So Eldon was forced to train for this crazy made-up attack on a regular basis. He would later admit that he could no longer take the abuse and craziness anymore, and so he snapped and decided to kill his father and younger brother. Eldon took out his father first. His younger brother, who had autism, was terrified and went to hide under a bed, but Eldon later found him and mercilessly took him out as well with a machete. Law enforcement arrived at the scene and placed Eldon in one of their vehicles as they inspected the crime scene. In this body cam footage, you can actually hear the distress in their voices when they found the victims.
Yeah, checking wrist. I can't tell if it's my heart racing or his.
I'll grab you one medical guy to come check.
Come, bring him in. Bring him in. I got a slight pulse. I can't tell if it's mine or his.
You sure?
No.
Eldon was taken into custody and brought into the interrogation room to speak with detectives. He seemed concerned about how much time it would take and whether or not he would be able to go home that night. At this point, it is clear he has not wrapped his head around how much trouble he truly is in.
So do you know why you're in the interview room with us today?
Yes.
Okay. Why is that?
Murder.
Okay. So explain to me what happened. What do you mean by that?
My dad, he was on his medication.
Okay.
He needs to do stupid things.
It doesn't take Eldon long to get into his father's crazy behaviors and zombie obsession.
He's done it before. He got mad at me. Remember? I wanted to do something, but I couldn't. He just next time did that. He was outside, just he was shooting guns out there, thinking there were zombies. And told me to go back inside.
Eldon told his father there was no zombie apocalypse and that he needed to go back inside and quit acting like a crazy person. But his father got angry at him and told him to go away. When Eldon refused to back down, he said his father came to him and started to physically hurt him. He even pulled his weapon out and pointed it at him. Not long after that, Eldon went into the house and retrieved one of his father's weapons that was not secure. It was already loaded. He then went back out and fired 3 times at his father. Eldon's story about his father trying to kill zombies in the backyard was backed by neighbors who had heard suspicious things going on at the house. They said the family, who had lived there for a short while, behaved very strangely. They had even reported them to law enforcement once because they suspected Eldon's father could have been on some sort of illegal substance.
Did you hear something?
Gunshot earlier sound like maybe
Okay, just one?
one single round.
About how long ago?
Hour and a half ago. There's a lot of weird people.
Okay. And they just moved here, my
They've been
understanding?
here 5 months maybe. 4 months? How long have they been here? I would say 6 months.
Eldon was ultimately found guilty of both first and second-degree murder charges. This case took a toll on even the judge presiding over it. It was a tragedy, depending either way you looked at it. 2 people, including a young child, had their lives viciously stolen from them. But at the same time, a troubled teenager's future was also gone.
The Honorable Benjamin Simpson said that this was a case that kept him up at night, wondering what he was going to do with this young man. You know, on one hand, he says that he couldn't blame him for what he did because of his upbringing, but on the other hand, he says that what he did was completely unexcusable.
The judge had to weigh a few different factors when considering this decision. Should Eldon be sent to serve his sentence with other people his age, or should he be sent to an adult prison?
Now, the biggest question today in court was whether to send a 16-year-old to juvenile detention facility or an adult prison. The defense wanted a blended sentence, which would have put Samuel in the juvenile detention center up until he was 21, and then he would be reevaluated for either probation or adult prison.
At the sentencing, Eldon's mother, Tina, asked the judge to have mercy on her son. Tina had previously left the family and knew about her former husband's bizarre behavior. She even said that she knew Eldon Jr. was planning on taking her sons on a trip to the mountains to train for a zombie apocalypse. It's clear that this was not a good environment that Eldon III had found himself in. It was also reported that Eldon Jr. struggled with addiction. He became addicted to painkillers due to the stress of dealing with his son's autism. This likely played a role in his seemingly irrational and strange behaviors. While in court, Eldon told the judge that he was not the same person he was on the day he committed the murders. He also said that he missed his father and little brother, whom he referred to as Johnny. He also recognized that the abuse he suffered was still not an excuse for the decisions he made in taking 2 lives.
Prosecutors wanted to see him go straight to an adult prison, away from juveniles who were serving time for far less serious crimes. A tearful Tina Samuel begged the judge to side with her son's defense, saying that he's all she has left and that she would give her life in the place of her son if she could.
Ultimately, the judge decided to sentence Eldon to 20 years in prison. While 2 decades behind bars may seem like a lot, it's hardly a life sentence for the teen. If he managed to behave in prison, he may be able to be released by the time he's in his 40s. This is what the prosecutor had to say following the sentencing.
It's good to have what we feel like is an appropriate result, and I would hope not to see another case like it, for sure.
Is 20 years enough time to spend behind bars after killing 2 people? Or do you think that because of the abusive circumstances of Eldon's life, that a lesser sentence would have been more fair? Let us know in the comments.
Land Nate attacked her?
It was both of us.
With what?
Like hammer thing, and then like a hammer thing with an axe at the other end.
In 2012, 12-year-old Antonio Barbeo and his best friend, Nathan Pape of Wisconsin, did the unthinkable. Motivated by greed, they came up with a plan to take the life of Anthony's 78-year-old great-grandmother, Barbara Olson. The boys knew that Barbara, who lived alone, had money, so they decided they were going to try to ambush and rob her. But just stealing from a defenseless old lady was not going to be enough to satisfy these twisted young boys. They decided that they would also brutally attack and kill her. The boys showed up at Barbara's home unannounced. In fact, it was Nathan's mother who drove them and dropped them off. She drove away completely oblivious to what her son and his friend had planned. The elderly lady was likely pleased by the unexpected surprise of her great-grandson and his best friend at the door. She never could have anticipated what they had planned for her when she opened the front door and let them inside. The boys entered the house armed with both a hatchet and a hammer. As soon as Barbara turned her back to them, they pounced and attacked her viciously. All the while, she screamed in shock and pain and called out for help. When they were sure that she was dead, the boys stole Barbara's jewelry and some money. Antonio and Nathan thought that they would be able to dispose of Barbara's body, but it was harder than they expected. Their plan was to put her body in her own vehicle and drive it somewhere else. But they couldn't lift her. They managed to drag her out of the garage, leaving a red trail as they went. When they realized they wouldn't be able to get her in the vehicle, they decided to leave her in the garage, hoping that it would look like this was some sort of intruder robbery situation gone bad. After that, they got into Barbara's car and drove off. Because they were still so young, they were barely tall enough to see over the steering wheel. As disgusting as what these two boys did to Barbara is, it is even more horrifying what they did afterwards, because it shows just how heartless and truly inhumane they are. Acting like they hadn't just killed a defenseless old lady, they went to a bowling alley, got pizza, and enjoyed themselves. Barbara's body wasn't even cold yet. It wasn't until 2 days after the murder that Barbara's daughter, Julia Oft, came to the house. Once she got into the house, she immediately realized that something really horrible had happened. She soon discovered her mother's body in the garage. Julia's first thought was that her mother had some sort of accident. Maybe she had fallen down or hurt herself in some way. Julia called 911, and within 12 hours, both Antonio and Nathan were arrested and charged with Barbara's murder. The boys may have been evil enough to carry out this horrible act, but they weren't smart enough to clean it up very well. They left lots of evidence behind, including red-stained clothes and shoes in Anthony's locker at school. Both Nathan and Antonio initially pleaded not guilty, with Antonio even claiming insanity as his defense. A psychiatrist in court testified that he could possibly have had some mental health challenges because of an accident that happened when he was 10 years old and was struck by a vehicle. But later on, Antonio would accept a plea deal and plead no contest. This would keep him from having to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Antonio was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 36 years. By that time, he'll have spent more time inside prison than he did out of it. While in court at sentencing, Antonio appeared visibly emotional. He prepared a statement but became too upset to continue to read it, so his lawyer did it for him. He seemed to express remorse for what he did. But was he really sorry, or was it all an act to get the court to feel bad for him?
No, I don't show my emotions much, and I myself am not sure why. But that doesn't mean I don't.
Because of his plea deal, Antonio would not have to face trial. Nathan, however, would. And it was a horrible trial for everyone involved. The defense tried to suggest that it was Antonio's idea to carry out this whole plan, and that Nathan had just agreed to go along with it. But the state said that Nathan was not nearly as innocent as they were trying to present him to be. They carefully laid out the details of the tragic day for the jury to hear. They said that Nathan had arrived home from school like he always did, and he made the conscious decision to arm himself with a hammer before going over to Barbara's house. At any point, he could have stopped. He could have said, "Wait, this is wrong," and just gone home. But he didn't do any of that. Instead, he went to Barbara's house and he participated in the brutal murder just as Antonio did. The state also took the time to detail each of Barbara's severe injuries. She was struck 27 times and had wounds all over her body, including her arm, face, legs, and hands. Her hands were probably hit while she was trying to protect her head from the vicious blows. The images of the wounds were shown in court. They were supposedly so sickening that even court officials had to turn their heads away. Tragically, we know that Barbara didn't die after the first few blows, but it likely took a while. She knew very well that it was her own great-grandson who did this to her. Nathan also testified and provided disturbing details that shook everyone in court. He said that during the attack, Antonio had paused to take off his sweatshirt because it was getting in the way of his swings. This is clearly some disturbing behavior for a child. Ultimately, the jury found Nathan, then 14 years old, guilty.
The jury fined the defendant, Nathan J. Pop, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
14-year-old Nathan Pop guilty of brutally murdering a 78-year-old woman, Barbara Olson.
Nathan was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 31 years. Do you think these boys were sentenced fairly, or did they deserve to spend the rest of their lives in prison? Let us know what you think in the comments.
What is amazing to me is that he showed absolutely no remorse for these crimes. This is obviously a dangerous person, and I beg you to sentence him with as many years as you can. Mom and Rick will never get to see one day ever again, and I don't see why he should.
17-year-old Isaiah Sweet's life had not always been easy, but nothing could have justified the horrific person he would turn out to be. Both of his parents struggled with addiction, and so he was raised by his grandparents, Janet and Rich Sweet. Despite the fact that they were older and had already finished having children, Janet and Rich loved their grandson and were happy to take Isaiah into their home and do whatever they could to raise him in a happy and safe environment. But not everything was smooth sailing. Isaiah had been diagnosed with ADHD at a young age, and as a result, would have behavior problems. Professionals would later determine that he might not have been getting the treatment that he needed to help with this disorder, and that it may have played a big factor in the arguments he would get into with his grandparents. Despite knowing everything that his grandparents had done for him and claiming to love them, Isaiah betrayed them in the worst way imaginable. On Mother's Day of 2012, it was supposed to be a nice day with family for the Sweets family. Extended family members were coming over to the home to celebrate the holiday together, but when they got there, they found a gory scene. The first thing they noticed was a broken window, which led them to believe that something could be wrong inside. They were able to look in, and that's when they discovered the bodies of both Janet and Rich. 911 was called immediately.
Hey, this is an emergency. We noticed a window off the side, and one person went in and looked and discovered a body.
Okay, do you know who it is?
Yes, I do. Janet and Rick Sweet.
There was immediate concern that an intruder could have gotten into the home and did this. It was expected that Isaiah was in the house. If so, could he have also been killed? But when they looked inside, he was nowhere to be found. Before long, he was considered a possible suspect. He was eventually tracked about 75 miles away from the home after fleeing the scene. He attempted to flee law enforcement, but as soon as he heard police dogs barking, he got scared and turned himself over. While in custody, Isaiah quickly confessed to losing his temper and killing both of his grandparents with an assault rifle. While speaking with a detective, he went through phases where he was crying and seemed remorseful, and then phases where it seemed as if he was almost proud of what he had done and was gloating about it. Listen to him describe the moment he killed his first victim, his grandfather.
See my grandpa's head, boom, pull the trigger back. I'm thinking, how fast am I gonna run?
It becomes clear throughout the interrogation that this teen clearly thinks he is the smartest person in the room. He thinks he can outsmart the detectives and even acts as if he is going to be able to go home by the end of the night. But this detective knows every trick in the book. He is pretending to act like Isaiah's friend so that he will feel comfortable enough to open up and tell him everything that happened. The detective even brings in some McDonald's for the teen. He had this to say as he gobbled down some fries.
You guys make me feel like I didn't do anything wrong.
Why do you say that?
Well, let's put it like this. I'm not gonna be lying to you guys about anything you ask me.
The teen acknowledged that he was aware of everything that his grandparents had done for him. He was also aware that they didn't deserve to be brutally killed in their own home at the hands of their own grandson that they had raised from a young age.
They didn't deserve that.
How come they didn't deserve it?
If anyone in that house deserved it, I did. More than anyone.
Take your time, brother.
They raised me since I was 4 and I would fade it was.
Isaiah did not hold back when reliving just how he took the lives of his grandparents. He talked about it so calmly, you would think that it was just a casual conversation about any normal thing, not a double murder.
When you say what happened that night at the house, what happened? Okay. What'd you shoot him with, Isaiah?
The assault rifle.
But then Isaiah seemed to flip the switch again by telling the detective that he had thoughts of self-harm because of the guilt he felt for what he had done.
I've tried to kill myself every single night since it happened.
Listen as Isaiah explains in detail, and with lots of pride, about how easily he was able to carry out the murders because of how skilled he was with the weapon. Keep in mind that this is a 17-year-old who should have never had access to a weapon like this in the first place.
Shot right there, grazed her head, and she was still moving, so I shot her right here through her head.
How close were you, Isaiah?
I could have made the shot from 300 yards. I'm an amazing shot, but I was probably 10, 15 feet away.
So is this teen truly deranged and mentally psychotic? Did he care about his grandparents at all? After all, this was not a video game involving fictional characters. These were real people, his own family.
And Isaiah, you understand that these are your grandparents. You know that they're human beings, they're people, right? You're nodding your head at me, yeah. Okay.
After killing his grandparents, Isaiah didn't stick around to try and render any sort of aid. He didn't even look close enough to double check. He said that by the state of the mess that was left behind, he didn't need to. He simply grabbed his things and fled the scene.
Did you check to see if they had a pulse? Did you check them at all?
My grandma's whole side of her face was blown off. So it's
Okay.
his. So like his brain was like on the coffee
Okay.
table.
But you didn't go over and, just to double
I
check?
kissed both of them and then packed my left.
Perhaps one of the most disturbing aspects of this interrogation is the way that Isaiah described the gore that was around the living room after he killed his grandparents. He even recalled picking some of it up and examining it. This seems like the actions of a true heartless killer with little humanity. What sort of teen can look at their grandparents' remains and behave this way?
Hey, let's go to the kitchen 15 feet away and there's a chunk of this big laying in there.
You go look at it?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I picked it up and I looked at it and I could see it was from my grandma.
Didn't that freak you out a little bit?
Kinda. I was like, oh, well, I'm a psychotic murderer anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
But you're not psychotic.
In 2013, Isaiah pled guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. His mother made a tearful plea for his life, asking the court to consider giving him another chance, so that one day he could maybe be free again and be a productive member of society.
My son does have compassion. He has a compassionate heart. And I believe that he doesn't deserve a chance at life.
His level of insight, his level of empathy, and his self-concept were much lower than I would have expected for somebody aged 17.
But other family members disagreed. They believed that because Janet and Rich would never get to enjoy another day of life, then Isaiah should never get to enjoy freedom again. The court agreed, and the teen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
A confessed teenage murderer will spend the rest of his life behind bars with no chance of parole. A judge sentenced Isaiah Sweet today for the murders of his grandparents, Richard and Janet Sweet.
The couple was found shot dead in their home in Manchester in May of 2012.
It looked like Isaiah was out of chances. He would be behind bars for the rest of his life. But then in 2016, the Supreme Court would make a shocking new ruling that would change everything. The court ruled that juveniles could no longer be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This was because when a person is under a certain age, their brain is not fully developed yet. This could have an impact on their decision making. So Isaiah now has the chance to live as a free man one day. However, he will need to show that he has been rehabilitated and that he will no longer be a danger to society if he is released. His status will be reviewed on a yearly basis to see the progress he has made. In 2018, after spending 4 years behind bars, the parole board ruled that he should not be released. They said that while he has made some positive changes in his life, he would need more time in prison for them to feel comfortable with his release. These are clearly some deranged killers who showed that it doesn't matter how old you are, even a teenager could be capable of doing some truly horrific things. In an instant, they can ruin their lives forever. Can people who do things like this truly be rehabilitated and be changed enough that they will no longer be a danger to society if they are released? Or should killer teens be kept in prison, where they can no longer have the option to take any more innocent victims? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.